Hey guys, Dustin here with isibrigade. I wanted to talk about this crank arm family. It's a CPI crank arm family. A lot of the problems that people have with them, what I've been doing with them, kind of the history of them, and what's available for them aftermarket. So GT, Robinson, and Powerlight both had the brand or the company CPI cast these out of 6061 aluminum. They're beautiful crank arms. This is all part of the CPI family. Also, you had Mosh and Top Flight had their version of this same crank arm, which used the same bottom bracket or the same spline. Now, that's one thing that sets these crank arms apart from other crank arms in the mid-school class. Is its unique spline. So the FSA spline was designed to be used with these crank arms, and there's really nothing else until recently that was available to make these crank arms work with your American bottom bracket. And this is kind of what that FSA bottom bracket looks like. What makes it really unique was it has conical bearings, which required conical cups, and as you can see, there's that unique spline that would fit. That would fit with that female on these crank arms. It also has a thru bolt, which was in order to kind of do a preload on the crank arms before you tightened up this nut and set it with that lock on that nut. This also had a lot of problems as well. So in a nutshell, I would say that the arms are beautiful. They are commonly sought after in the collectors in the collectors industry right now. They go for a lot of money. I'm going to say great crank arms, beautiful crank arms. They're not terribly heavy. They're made of solid aluminum, but unfortunately they were paired with what I would argue is the worst bottom bracket ever made in BMX history. And I think some of you out there would agree with me right off the bat. I'm going to go through the problems with this bottom bracket, and I'm going to go through how to fix it, okay? And it might be worth mentioning that these CPI crank arms were commonly paired with some of the higher end race bikes, the GT Speed Series, GT Pro Series. You had the P51, P61, the Powerlight cockpit had these arms on there, and it was a real popular kind of top shelf crank arm that you'd see on the late 90s, early 2000s model racers. Unfortunately, it didn't last very long, and that's mostly because, well, it was paired with this pile of junk here. So let's go through why this created so many problems for these crank arms, and why we didn't see these crank arms continue in the racing or bike industry. Problem number one is these conical bearings they're not sealed. Okay, this just if you remove this C-clip from this two-part conical these conical races, you would have just a loose ball cage inside there. And it's also worth mentioning that this is a total proprietary part. You can't find this in any bearing houses, order them in a bearing catalog or nothing. These were two races that I believe FSA just had made special for this contraption. So squeaky, obviously when you're racing in the dirt, this is going to get dirty. It's not really ideal for most racetrack conditions. Secondly, it's composed of 8 proprietary parts. You've got the thru bolt nut, these two conical bottom bracket cups that are nothing like any other bottom bracket that you've ever seen. These conical bearings, of course, the spindle is unique and proprietary to this crank arm family, and then you've got this nut, which is just an aluminum thread on aluminum, and didn't tend to stay tight when it was supposed to. All these problems led to people being very frustrated with the product. They'd lose one part. That's just probably problem number one, was this guy right here. There's no way to hold this nut in place while you're tightening this thing. It's just an umbrella nut with no spanner holes, no wrench flats. There's nothing there to not just tighten it, but also I commonly find these with a groove sawed out in order for people to hold onto this with a screwdriver or some sort of lever to hold that in place while they break this bolt loose. So both installing and removing this became a major issue with this assembly. The other common issue with this whole setup, and I wouldn't blame it on the bottom bracket, but it was how the crank arms attached to the sprocket. Notice this is not a bolt or a screw. It's just what I call a drive dog. Okay, so it's just a stud. In fact, I have one here that I've removed from another crank arm. I actually removed these out of every single CPI crank that they're in because this creates more noise and more problems than anything else in this whole setup. Why? Well, unlike every other sprocket to crank setup that we've seen in like for 4 decades now, this does not have a bolt. This is not a bolt that clamps your sprocket to the arm. Okay, it just kind of dogs and drives in there, which well, it causes noises after about just an hour of riding. It wallers out your slot there that's designed for a bolt to go through and clamp. And so this is noise. It's also, you know, some backlash going on there. So you have, you know, some delay in the torque going to your drivetrain, and it messes with your sprocket or with your spider. Okay, it just begins to mushroom that slot, open it up, and making the problem even worse. So what I do, and on these Powerlight crank arms, let's see, it's okay. Yeah, so I have a custom bolt. Of course, they had to use a metric fine thread, which is just a total bastard to find. But not only do you have to find that particular bolt, but you also have to modify it in order to create clearance on the bottom bracket. There's probably one of the reasons why they went with this design was because they found that there was no clearance. Once this was all assembled with the bottom bracket, it would rub up against the bottom bracket cup here if there was a head to the bolt. So I was able to find a bolt that would work, but I had to modify the top end of it. So I sell these as well. Just get a hold of me and ask me. So I have this special bolt where I've machined the top so that there is some built-in clearance for the bottom bracket cup, so it doesn't rub up against that once everything's installed correctly. And obviously, while using that is allowing you to clamp your sprocket or your spider to the crank, that surface on the crank arm, making it a much more rigid setup and a much cleaner drive. So that was those were the biggest problems that just turned this into a noisy contraption, and they didn't last very long. So you had the drive dog problem. You had these bearings that weren't sealed that got dirty, but still. So collectors still love these arms, even though we've got all these issues associated with the bottom bracket. They're trying to find a way to make the arms work on their riders, and even people who are putting these on some mid-school racers and racing with them. And so I came up with a product a couple of years ago, and it's been tried and tested, that replaces this mousetrap, so to speak, and also got rid of your through bolt. So we talked about problem number 1, which is an easy fix. Getting rid of the drive dog and replacing it with a screw. The main nuts and bolts of the issue, though, is this bottom bracket. And about 2 years ago, I came up with a design that works great for American bottom brackets. I did also do a couple of prototypes for Euro bottom brackets, and I have one on one of my Euro bottom brackets that I'm testing out. So I may come out with those later on down the line. One of these that will fit a 24 millimeter bottom bracket. Right now, these are special cups with a 6005 bearing. That's 25 millimeter. I've got a 7075 aluminum spindle that goes with these crank arms. Most importantly is these are sealed cartridges, and everything just goes together really clean. It makes it really easy to to place preload on these bearings. And I've been racing with this bottom bracket here for a couple of years now, and have even taken it apart to check to see if there were any wear points or cracks or anything like that. And it was great. I'm extremely satisfied with that. So again, this is a 7075 spindle that will work with all of your CPI crank arms, and in anodized black. We even we lasered it with the ISI Brigade logo, but just recently we put Made in USA, which is the same font as that you'll see on the GT piston stems, and actually the same scale as well. We thought that would be cool, just because kind of those two things went together. So this I sell, the complete bottom bracket. One of the things I did was I did kind of sort of get rid of the through bolt. However, you could use, if you want to keep the original look, because this is really the only thing that's seen once all these are installed. If you wanted to use your original through bolt with this, you can. This is actually a hollow spindle with plenty of clearance to incorporate your through bolt with that. But you're going to have a much better performance with this. You're going to get rid of the squeaky mess, and it's going to be much longer lasting. It comes with a dust cap for the non-drive side. It also comes with a washer that I actually had ground these surfaces so that it makes really good contact with the inner bearing race, and with the outer, actually that would be with the spider, the sprocket there. So it's making really good contact there, keeping your sprocket nice and perpendicular to the spindle, and it's made for a great racing setup for me for a couple of years. Also, what I should mention is if you wanted to keep with a through bolt design but did not want to use the FSA through bolt because they're too hard to install or too hard to take apart without any wrench flats or anything like that, I came up with an alternative through bolt design. So I machined these. It actually installs pretty nice and clean. This is a bolt with it's got its own umbrella nut, but the nice thing is it's got some spanner holes that you could actually grab onto. And so I actually sell it as a kit. So it's got this through bolt assembly along with this spanner tool that allows you to hold onto the spanner nut while tightening using an Allen key from the other end. And that makes it a lot easier to install and remove. So something there that you can contact me about. I'll put a link to that setup there as well.